What on those albums, Thriller for example, is you? You know, you have his music, some of his writing, some of his
but look,
influence.
we take his stuff and take it to another level.
Michael Jackson's death was perhaps one of the biggest shocks in 2009. Celebrities mourned, and his memorial held in Los Angeles was packed with fans. You know, when a man dies, you'd expect that the first set of people coming through the door are those he loved and those who loved him. But it was definitely a bigger shock to the world when the man who produced Thriller, Off the Wall, and Bad was nowhere to be seen. Yes, Quincy Jones did not work through that door. Keep watching, because the reason is not something anyone would expect. The day the world said goodbye. July 7th, 2009 was a memorable day in the Staples Center in Los Angeles as it held one of the biggest and most broadcasted events of all time. With over 17,500 people present in the arena, the Staples Center was definitely a place to be. In the first few hours after the announcement of the event, tickets alone had over 1.6 million requests, and fans from all over the world wanted to get it. And for those who couldn't make it physically watched it live, with an estimate of 31 million Americans tuning in to their screen. It was undoubtable. The world had united both physically, virtually, and emotionally to bid Michael Jackson, the king of pop, farewell. His name was a household name to everyone. Politicians, celebrities, and fans from the four corners of the earth paid their tributes. And flowers were placed at every landmark associated with his name and his music. And when it was time to bid him farewell, people flooded the streets of Los Angeles. However, from the long list of celebrities and loved ones who were present, there was one name missing. And this wasn't just anybody or any celebrity. No. One of the biggest figures in Michael's life was absent at his own memorial. To get things straight, it wasn't like he was caught in traffic or that he was unaware. On the contrary, he had been asked and invited to the memorial, but he said no, he decided not to be present. Quincy Jones was Michael Jackson's renowned producer. He had helped produce many of Michael's hits, and he had been one of the many people who helped push the musical genius, taking him from a young talent in the Jackson 5 band to becoming a global icon. Quincy was definitely loved by Michael Jackson before the King of Pop died, and he too held Michael in his heart, however he had chosen not to be present. It wasn't that he did not mourn Michael, rather he just did not do so in public. Now, even though he wanted to mourn privately, this act of his wasn't appreciated or accepted by everyone. Many people thought it was unusual and disrespectful to want to mourn such an icon in private. Their question was simple: how could the man behind the mixing board of Thriller and many other hits decide not to appear? How do you inspire someone to do their best work, create something that will endure for ages, and then miss the day the world will unite to celebrate them? And to be honest, their questions were not far off. However, Quincy Jones' decision to not come was not wrong either. Their questions then were left unanswered. Until this day, they never left. However, a closer look at Quincy Jones's life, and the answers to these questions begin to surface. See, Quincy Jones is definitely more than meets the eyes. He has suffered huge losses even before Michael's death. However, the answers you get when you look into his life and the losses he has suffered was not necessarily what Jackson's fans were looking for. When you put into perspective all of the things highlighted above, was Quincy Jones truly justified for not coming to Michael's memorial? Well, that is exactly what we are about to unravel. So stay with me, because once you see it, you will never look at that moment the same way again. The man behind the greatest album of all time. The answer you are looking for as to why Quincy Jones didn't go is not something you will find at the surface. Before understanding why Quincy Jones didn't attend the memorial at the Staples Center, you need to understand who Quincy Jones was and what the deal between Quincy and Michael Jackson was. Their relationship was no ordinary working relationship. It was not a producer/artist that connected for one album only. It transcended that by so much more. Music is one thing that molded both their lives in a way that they did not expect when it began, and their relationship was a testament of that. First, it is important to know that Quincy Jones did not get his fame by working as Michael's producer. In fact, Quincy was already a legend in the music industry, a long time before Michael Jackson gained his fame and became a legend. Jones was born in Chicago in 1933, and unfortunately, she was born into poverty. On the night he stumbled upon a piano, he had been looking for food to eat, and just like that, built a relationship in music and found himself in it. In his later years, he attributed that moment to being the one that changed everything. After he found the piano, the rest was basically history. He studied jazz, wrote arrangements for big bands, performed with giants such as Dizzy Gillespie, Count Basie, and Frank Sinatra, and was one of the most versatile and talented musical minds in Hollywood history. The small-town boy from Chicago was making it big in music across the country. Jones and Jackson first met in 1978 while they were both working on the set of The Wiz, but before that he had walked a path that not many people, even celebrities, would have come out of. In 1974, for example, he almost died from a brain aneurysm. Apart from this, he had lost loved ones and laid friends to rest. But this definitely did not stop him in his tracks to being a legend. See, Quincy was ahead of the trends as well as his peers. He had a knack for spotting talent. It was all of like a sixth sense, like he had a radar. And the moment Michael Jackson came under that radar, he spotted talent and decided to work with him. When they met, Jackson had asked him to suggest producers for his next solo album, and almost immediately, Quincy Jones said he will do it. That was a simple decision that resulted in Off the Wall in 1979, Jackson's first official solo album after the Jackson 5 and a big hit. Then in 1982 came Thriller, and everything in popular music changed. They both did wonders with that album, as is still evident today. Thriller is still the biggest album in history, and it's estimated to have sold more than 70 million copies worldwide. Give years after Thriller was released, Bad followed suit in 1987, and like many of Michael's releases, it had not only resonated with the world, but also broken records. Bad was the first album to have 5 consecutive #1 singles on the Billboard Hot 100. With this, it was very obvious that the relationship between this producer and musician was not an ordinary feat, as it shook the music world. When we say it was no ordinary relationship, we aren't just saying so. See, those 3 records created a history for Jones and Jackson. Their collaboration was the subject of many discussions, including the overview of their partnership at Fair Observer, which chronicles the origins and success of their collaboration. The 3 albums sold a total of more than 100 million copies. Pause for a moment and consider this number. 100 million copies sold. That's no walk in the park. It's a degree of cultural penetration that's almost inexplicable. The duo did absolutely wonderful things together. They made great music together, and one could even say through those great music, they brought most of the world together, united. However, when in June 2009, Quincy allegedly symbolically stood outside of that relationship that the both of them had built, the whole world definitely wanted to know why. Quincy Jones was a man who had already lost too many people. To be honest, it would be unfair for anyone to question or doubt If Quincy Jones truly cared about Michael Jackson, Jones truly cared about Michael, and in 2009, most news articles about the story and how he missed the memorial were missing this. Quincy Jones's love for Michael Jackson was a given. He had actually already given that answer. On June 25, 2009, when news of Jackson's death finally broke, Jones gave an instant press release. He said it was catastrophic. He said that he was unable to express anything. He explained how Divine had united their souls on The Wiz, and how the music they made would echo in every corner of the world forever. Then he said the line that put every critic who had ever charged him with coldness in silence. He stated that he lost his little brother, and a part of his soul went with Michael. In reality, Quincy Jones was just a bereaved man who was grieving too. The way he spoke was not the way a non-carer would have spoken. His words were the words of a truly grieving man. He didn't speak all for show. This was his own way of showing his raw grief, and whether critic or anyone at that liked it or not, it was very real. Jones was in London when he learned about the death of the musician. His own words were that he had just been informed of the deaths of Ed McMahon and Farrah Fawcett within a few days, and then Michael Jackson's death fell on his shoulders. He said that it was a surrealistic experience. He said he didn't have time to get it. He stated it was a great shock to him that Michael had preceded him. This man was already carrying so much weight on his shoulders from the death of other loved ones when the news of Michael's death came crashing him. So it was definitely expected that he grieved in a different way from others. But that wasn't even all. There was another side of his story, a side that unfortunately many casual observers who merely saw things from the surface could not see. Before Michael Jackson's death, Quincy Jones already made a private and quiet decision about funerals. This was to be an emotional decision, and he had decided that he was not going to attend them anymore. This decision, of course, would not have been easy for him, as he would not only be missing the opportunity to see a loved one one more time, he was also going to be missing the one event held to specifically honor them. His decision to not attend any more funerals was not unfounded, neither was it an accident. He told the press, "I want to remember them the way they were, rather than attending the funeral." He had chosen to remember his loved ones in their best moments and not have that memory tainted by the sight of them lying in a coffin. In short, his decision was not a casual preference. This was the result of a lifetime of loss that would have broken most people entirely. By the time Michael Jackson died, Jones had lost more than 150 people in just a few years. He himself stated this in several interviews. What was worse was that the people he lost were not just mere acquaintances or some loose industry connections. Instead, they were people he had known intimately, those he had worked with closely, those he had laughed with, those who were his friends. He mentioned Ray Charles in particular. He called out the name of Marvin Gaye. He made the statement in his official record that 150 people in 2.5 years was just enough. He could not go on like this. He could not step into rooms of caskets and recall the person who was resting in one as a man or woman he was once alive and musical. He was at that point chart so much weight that any other person would crumble under. It was definitely understandable that he could not bear the burden of one more burial. Now, it might seem like a man just being dramatic or making up excuses, but wait. Let's take a step back to a few years before this happened. In 1974, at the age of 40, doctors discovered that Jones had a life-threatening brain aneurysm. So bad was the condition that his friends and family feared he wouldn't survive the surgery. They started to organize a memorial for him before he even died. In one of the most bizarre events in music history, Jones even observed his memorial service, seated next to his neurologist at the Shrine Auditorium, as Ray Charles and Marvin Gaye and Billy Eckstine honored him, all of whom were still alive. It was later in a reflective mood, in one of his dark jokes, that he said he had actually been to his own funeral. Consider the impact that has on an individual. You are seated at your own memorial. You see those you love waving goodbye, and you're still breathing. You survive. And over the next decades, those who sang for you at that night start to depart one by one. Ray Charles dies. Marvin Gaye dies. Friend after friend, colleague after colleague. And every funeral is another iteration of that initial sorrow, an intensification and recapitulation, a crushing of the weight until it is just too much. And Michael Jackson was not just another name on that list. He was the person Jones had spent a decade inside studios with, building something the world had never heard before. He was the shy young man who sang behind a couch because he could not bear to be watched. He was, by Jones's own words, his little brother. To show up at the Staples Center and grieve in front of 31 million people might not have felt like honor to Jones. It might just have been to him putting up a performance. And after everything Jones had already carried, after every room he had already sat in watching people he loved be reduced to eulogies and flowers, he had earned the right to say no. Not out of bitterness, and definitely not because they had of unresolved tension between them, but because some losses are too large and too personal to be witnessed by anyone else. Because sometimes the most honest thing a person can do is admit that they have nothing left to give a crowd, even when the crowd is grieving the same person they are. That's why Quincy Jones didn't go to Michael Jackson's funeral. It wasn't a matter of coldness or only unresolved conflict. He's been to too many goodbyes, and he was being honest enough and forthright enough to say it. Hold on, because upcoming events may alter your perspective of it forever. What Quincy Jones actually said. We've given a background to the various incidents that would have influenced Quincy Jones's decision to not attend Michael's memorial, but this doesn't mean he stayed silent. In early July 2009, Quincy Jones was not evasive when reporters asked him where he obtained his information at London's Heathrow Airport. He replied to it in a straightforward manner, and it was not prepared or rehearsed. It felt like a person who had already come to terms with a resolution they didn't need to argue for. When asked if he would be attending the memorial, he said, "No, not at all. It was going to be in the presence of 9 million people, and that is not what I want," he said. His condolences and love had been sent to the family already, he said. Then he posted the line that really counts. He said being there with 10 million people was not his idea of a tribute to someone he was so close to, someone who had a part of his soul. He said their souls were joined, and a piece of it, he explained, had gone with Michael. That's a tell-all statement. Quincy Jones was not evading a burial in order to not pay tribute to Jackson. He was avoiding it because what he thought of as a real tribute, a personal one, intimately, that matched what they had shared, that was not going to happen in a crowd like that. The Staples Center event was gigantic. It was designed that way. This was a public event. Mariah Carey performed. Stevie Wonder performed. Berry Gordy spoke. Cameras abounded. All of the movements were filmed, broken down, and watched by 31 million people in the United States. This was an event that he didn't associate with being in a studio, sitting in a dimly lit room, and sharing complete trust with another man. You definitely couldn't say that Jones had not paid his homage, as he had been sent his condolences to Jackson's family. He did everything that everyone did except mourning him in person, and in many ways, that was justified. When he was talking about his decision, he also referred to Ray Charles. Ray Charles had died not long ago. Abidi, he had already made his farewells to Ray. He had already bid his farewells to Marvin Gaye. He had been bidding goodbye for years and years, and at some point, the human spirit has to protect itself. But that's not weakness. Remember when we mentioned that not going to the funeral was to make sure that he preserved the memories of his loved ones who had died? Well, yes, he also addressed his last memory of Jackson directly. The last time that he had seen Michael was during a dinner in London in May 2009, some weeks before his death, he said. He recalled that he had told Michael that he would see him again in Los Angeles. Then he never did. That must have been heart-wrenching for him. One minute someone G held dear to his heart, like family was there, and the next minute he wasn't. That memory, that final mundane talk, that last time when he didn't know it was the last time, was what Quincy Jones remembered. Not a casket, not a stadium, a dinner in London. Later, when he spoke to students at Loyola Marymount University, Jones said he couldn't describe how he felt when he heard the news. "I went off my rocker," he said. "It was heavy, quite heavy," he said. He said that the relationship between any producer and the artist must be based on love and respect and a mutual trust between the both of them, where there is no room for pretense. When two people have that, it's something special, he said. He had shared that something special with Michael, and when the king of pop died, he didn't just lose him, he lost that relationship too, the complicated space between them. The story becomes complicated and layered when you think about the relationship Quincy Jones had with Michael Jackson and how it was smooth all the time. In the years before Michael Jackson died, they both parted ways professionally after the Bad album of 1987. Jackson was looking for more creative control of his music. He wanted more of it made in his own voice. He wanted more of his songs to explore new sounds. Jackson also wanted to try out new producers, people who would allow him do the work and not the other way around. And this was evident from 1991 with Dangerous, as he used different producers for his various albums. Now, when this separation happened, Jones did not say much. In fact, around that time he mostly stayed quiet, but the truth was that he took that separation to heart. In a 2018 interview, when he spoke about the separation, he explained that he felt a paradigm shift in his thinking of the music business at the time. He said he had to let go of certain things, that there were parts of the process he never liked. It was obvious that he tried to phrase his words carefully. However, how he felt and the message he was trying to pass was evident. There had been a change, something between them, and it was never fully mended. Years later, after Jackson's death, Jones became embroiled in a legal tangle with the Jackson estate over royalties he felt he rightly deserved for his edits and remixes of Jackson's recordings. He brought a claim for almost $30 million in 2013. The case was taken to court. In 2017, he was awarded $9.4 million by a jury, but it was later lowered to $2.5 million by an appellate court. The Jackson estate lawyer said Jones was the last guy that the family thought they'd see abusing Michael Jackson's legacy. The legal part of the story made it even more complicated. To some, it looked like an opportunistic move for Jones. To others, it was simply a working man defending his rights in a contract of work that he truly made. The real meaning was most likely in between both reading. It does reveal one thing, however. Quincy Jones and Michael Jackson were human beings. It was complicated. It was warm and loving, but also tense and disagreeable, and had unspoken feelings that neither of them ever fully aired before Jackson departed. This is not an unusual relationship for two creative individuals who worked side by side for 10 years to create something really big. In fact, it's almost a law of the land. Perhaps that's why Jones decided to mourn in private. Public grief needs a clean story. It forces you to stand in front of the cameras and say nothing but love and legacy, loss. It doesn't allow for all the complex emotions that accompany a relationship as deep and intricate as theirs. Jones couldn't be in that arena and be a symbol of simple mourning when he felt so much more complex than that. And maybe that is the part nobody wants to talk about, because it is easier to call his absence cold than to admit that some relationships carry too much history to be summarized at a podium. The people who showed up that day, many of them loved Michael Jackson genuinely. But very few of them knew what it felt like to argue over a snare drum at 2 in the morning and still get it right. Very few of them had felt the specific weight of watching someone you helped build outgrow you, and having to make peace with that while the world told you to be proud. Jones carried all of that. I'm his grid. There was warmth and wound, pride and loss, and none of it had anywhere to go inside a stadium. Grief needs room to be honest, and that day there was no room for anything except celebration. So he stayed away. Stay with me, because what we are about to get into next is the part of this story that ties everything together. What it means to mourn on your own terms. There is something to be said for what Quincy Jones decided to do that day. The world has a very clear idea of what grief looks like, and what grief acts like, especially when it's related to a public figure, a public moment. There is this belief that you have to be present to show closeness, and in Quincy's case, many believed that it was being present at the service that demonstrated that he cared. The fact that he wasn't present for the memorial, especially with Michael being a big-time star, meant people suspected that his absence was out of spite or bitterness. But that line of reasoning doesn't hold true if you examine it closely. Grief isn't a show. It doesn't require listeners or an audience. The deepest grief is the one that can happen in the smallest moments and most silent rooms, with no one else there to witness, and no camera, no crowd, no one expecting to see. Quincy Jones had been sending his love and condolences to the family even before the funeral took place. He had issued a public statement already, and in its sincerity, it was more moving than most of the formal tributes that day. He had already borne the weight of the death of Michael without all of the publicity, held it in London, away from the public. He had made his decision on something the critics of his absence never quite picked up on. For a long time he had suffered the loss of loved ones, and it had weighed him down, and he decided not to carry any more of that suffering in front of an audience. Is that his fault? It's not easy to say this plainly. People grieve differently. Some want the ritual, the meeting, the physicality to say goodbye. Some require solitude, a distance, and private memory. Both are equally valid. It's a social norm and not a universal truth that we go to funeral services because it's the most authentic way to express love. The best indication is that Jones did not show up, and the line in his statement regarding memory. He stated that he didn't wish to have 10 million as his tribute. He was looking for something on par with what they had. The truth is, nothing, not even a stadium, no matter how crowded, could have held what those 3 albums represented. No memorial, however well organized, could have captured what it meant to sit in a studio in the early 1980s. listening to a young man sing behind a couch with his back to the room because he was too shy to perform face-to-face, and knowing somehow that what was happening in that room was going to change the world. That's what Quincy Jones was safeguarding when he was away, not a cold heart. Perhaps he was protecting, remembering, and keeping for himself the version of Michael Jackson that none of us knew, the one that existed before fame became so overwhelming that the real Michael Jackson was even hard to perceive. To love someone to the extent where no public ceremony can be held to appreciate the extent of how much they meant to you. To decide that the best tribute you can offer is the one that nobody else gets to see. Quincy Jones passed away on November 3rd, 2024, at the age of 91. He went quietly, at home, surrounded by family. And somewhere in the legacy he left behind, the albums and the scores and the decades of music that will outlast all of us, so did the memory of what he and Michael Jackson made together. That was the longest-lasting tribute, more than any attendance at any funeral. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.